The conference room smelled of fresh coffee and polished oak. Captain Marcus Hale leaned forward in his Brioni suit, Patek watch glinting under the lights, and dropped the folder on the table with a slap. He looked straight at the man in the faded coveralls and said, "You're finished here, Chief. Scrap metal like you has no place on my bridge. Take your toolbox and get off my ship." He had no idea the man he had just humiliated in front of 30 officers was about to own every deck he stood on. Chief Tom Riley had once been that wide-eyed 18-year-old who signed his name in a recruiting office in Tulsa for a $13,000 bonus. His father never showed at the bus depot. His mother pressed a folded letter into his palm before he climbed aboard. "Open it when you think you can't go on," she whispered. The paper still lived in his wallet 27 years later. Boot camp at Great Lakes taught him to move before thought. He learned to fold shirts into 6-inch squares at 0-400, scrub heads until the bleach burned his eyes, and haul fire hoses through smoke so thick it hit his own boots. He graduated with a single Silver Crow and orders to a destroyer in San Diego. The first deployment taught him seasickness could last 11 straight days. He chipped paint until his knuckles split, stood midnight watches in the Combat Information Center, and memorized every valve and circuit while others slept. A chief once told him the sea doesn't care about your grief. Tom believed him the night his father died, and the email arrived 4 days late. By year 12, he pinned on Chief Petty Officer. The initiation was never spoken of outside the mess. Gold anchors replaced the silver. 40 sailors began calling him Chief instead of Tom. He taped his daughter's crayon drawings of gray ships inside his locker. Each time the pier slid away, he watched his wife shrink to a single dot on the pier. One night, a young seaman left a valve open during a drill that could have flooded the forward compartments. Tom took the captain's anger himself. He corrected the sailor later, in private, voice low, the folded letter still in his back pocket like a promise. Then a rear admiral pulled him aside after a Pacific exercise. "You're wasting your time as a chief, Riley. Apply for the Mustang program." Tom doubted himself at 38, competing against 23-year-old college grads. He studied on mid-watches between refueling at sea. They selected him anyway. He accepted his ensign bar with the same hands that once scrubbed toilets at midnight. The wardroom was colder than the goat locker. Some officers saw only the Mustang who had skipped the academy line. Tom answered by arriving at 0430 and leaving at 2300. He drove a 9,400-ton destroyer through the Strait of Malacca on 4 hours of sleep. Voice steady on the bridge wing, while a foreign frigate tested his nerve at 800 yards. He never blinked. He made lieutenant commander, then took command of combat systems on a new cruiser. When a missile launcher failed during a live-fire night exercise off Guam, he crawled inside the mount himself at 0214, traced a faulty relay, and brought the system back online in 90 seconds. The ship scored perfect. Only the chiefs who watched him emerge covered in grease knew how close failure had come. Promotion to executive officer followed. Then, on a clear Tuesday morning in Norfolk, the orders read aloud on the quarterdeck. Tom Riley became captain of a USS Vanguard, a $1.8 billion guided missile destroyer and 300 souls. The same Captain Hale who had once called him scrap metal now stood at attention in the front rank, face pale. During a tense patrol in the South China Sea, a shadowing destroyer closed to 400 yards and crossed the Vanguard's bow. Every watchstander waited for the order that could start a war. Tom kept course and speed, voice calm on the tactical circuit. The intruder finally turned away into the mist. No one ashore ever learned how thin the line had been. Months later, the ship returned to Norfolk for a change of command review. The pier was lined with admirals, spouses, and the same officers who had witnessed Hale's public dismissal. Tom stepped to the microphone in dress whites, the folded letter now pressed flat inside his cover. He read his orders. The crew saluted. Then he did something no one expected. He asked Captain Hale to join him at the podium. Hale's Italian shoes squeaked once as he approached. His hands trembled as he accepted the microphone. "I owe you an apology, Captain Riley," he said, voice cracking over the open channel. "I dismissed the very man who taught this ship how to fight. I was wrong. I am sorry." The words carried across the pier. 30 officers who had smirked that day in the conference room now stood silent. Tom simply nodded once, then pulled the faded letter from his cover. He read his mother's words aloud for the first time in his life. "You are always more than they saw. The sea will prove it." Later that evening, in the quiet of his cabin, Tom placed the letter on his desk beside a new crayon drawing from his granddaughter. His wife stood in the doorway, gray at the temples, eyes soft with 30 years of port calls and lonely duty. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The ache in his knees, the ring in his ears, the years of 4 o'clock awakenings. All of it settled into something almost like peace. The boy who once stepped off a dark bus in coveralls had climbed every rung. Not for rank. For the sailors still standing their first watches tonight, still seasick, still afraid. The ocean always takes something. But sometimes, if you refuse to quit, it hands you back the only thing that ever mattered. Yourself, witnessed by the very voices that once tried to throw you away.